Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the December 13th, 2024 Long Range Planning Committee meeting. Our first item on the agenda this morning would be roll call and identifying voting members.
Alan Paul,
Here.
Rick Shanae,
Here.
Peter Freilinger,
Here.
Robin Saunders, here, Portia Hirschman,
Here.
Judy Fisher,
Here.
Rachel Hendrickson,
Here.
Corey Fellows,
Here.
and John Anderson. He's here.
He's trying.
Yeah.
So do we have identification of people who are here from the public so that we
Yeah, that would be
know as a committee?
a good idea.
I'm sorry.
And
What did you say?
People.
identify the people from the public that are here joining us in the room. And I
Do we
believe,
do that now or with public comment?
Well, because I
Because
think
we're
people are
intermingled.
sprinkled around, so I was
Yeah.
trying to be sure who was who.
Hi, excuse me, good morning, I'm Dan Dickinson, I'm the landowner of 40 Holmes Road, which is the junkyard on Holmes Road. And 121 and 151 Two Rod Road, which is a total of
Yep.
78 acres, so I'm a landowner and I have major concerns about the adjustments to the
All right.
district ordinance.
thank you.
My name is Ryan Jones and I live at 108 Running Hill Road in Scarborough. And see, we're here to discuss potentially adding some amendments to the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
So
That is bad.
I was gonna introduce you, this is my new planner for the town, this is Helen Harmon.
Wonderful. Hey.
Our meetings usually go better because they are over there.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, who did you
Yeah.
say the voting members are then?
We have Alan, Rick, Peter, Robin, and Portia. So we have a full
We have
five.
full-
members.
full complement of voting members,
And counselors are voting members or non-voting members?
non-voting.
And then did
I'm Denise Hamilton on 167 Two Rod Road in Light Industrial Park. Well,
All right, thank you. Item 2 is review of the minutes of November the 8th. Any comments?
I need to recuse, I was not present for that meeting, so.
Okay. Other comments? All right, seeing none, all in favor?
show that as four. Oh,
excuse me, am I a voting member?
Yeah,
not today.
oh yeah, that's right, you're the
You'll
first
be
alternate.
moved up if we don't have a quorum of regular members.
No, I understand this. Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda today is to discuss and make a potential recommendation to the ordinance committee for proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance to permit landscape contractor uses in the rural farm zoning district and to consider the same request for the Running Hill district.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. So we had this on our agenda a couple of months ago, and then we had it on our agenda last month, but we didn't get to it. So I put it first. Since then, we've also received an additional request from Mr. Jones. So I'll just walk you through it and then we can have a conversation. Let me share my screen.
I can't hear you very well.
Perhaps you could move closer to me. I'm really pretty loud normally.
You wanna swap?
Yeah, it might be easier, Judy.
No, it's okay. I don't want to be able to see the screen.
Yeah, there's nothing on this screen. I'm not gonna be able to share my screen in here.
Oh, that's gonna be.
Okay, so go to your paper handouts. So everything, the packet doesn't have the whole 130 page agenda, but it has the things that are pertinent to the discussion, I think. So we talked about, the request had to do with landscape contractor uses in the rural farming district. And the main reason for Paul Beaver's original request was that he wanted the same benefits to allow employee housing that agricultural uses could have. And so it came up as a request to consider landscape contractors similar to agricultural. Through the review and discussion, What I've proposed is that we actually create a new use, a landscape contractor. There's some really good information, for that out there. And so what you have before you is a draft that creates a new use landscape contractor, the definition, and then it would allow that in the RF district, subject to performance standards. And the performance standards have to do, we talked about a minimum acreage requirement, and we talked about a minimum acreage requirement of 4 lots in the RF. And then also that the side and rear yard, wanted to make sure that there was protections for residential properties adjacent to those. So the performance standards include the minimum lot area is 4 acres, the minimum side and rear yard is 25 feet or 50% of the building height, whichever is greater. Except that all side and rear yards abutting residential districts should be a minimum of 50 feet or the height equivalent of the principal building use. We also added performance standards about the number of motor vehicles and trailers for equipment and supplies, and that adequate parking must be provided. And sale of plant materials is prohibited. So again, this was just for the contractor business, not a retail establishment. And that the planning board may regulate the hours of operation. So if you're following along, this is the page that. Those good.
I'm sorry, I can't see if I lean forward. Can you define a little bit more what you're talking about in regards to hours of operation?
I just put in, planning board may regulate the hours of operation. We have, because specifically if we had a request that came in that was adjacent to residential homes. So they wouldn't want them out there unloading trailers at 10 o'clock at night, perhaps. But
Okay.
if they're in an isolated area and maybe they have a 10 acres, maybe it's not a concern.
Mhm.
So that's why I put it in there, that the planning board would have that authority.
Okay,
That's what I was thinking.
yeah, I know that if we consider this with auxiliary housing, I'm just trying to see how that would play into the hours of operation. Obviously, they would be there 24/7 conceivably, weekends or whatever.
Sure.
But I didn't know if there would be limitations on what the contractor might be able to do on weekends, for example. If he had equipment or machinery that he would be using, would he be allowed to use that on his property if it's abutting a residential area? That's what I'm getting at.
So maybe a clarification with regard to the nearness of residential. I mean, I just think somebody looking at it and saying, okay, does this give me what I need or not?
Yeah,
Um,
and we're probably fine just leaving it with the planning board, but
Planning board, fine.
I'm
The
just,
planning board is looking at agricultural housing, so this is something that, I guess I
Agricultural,
would have a concern, especially on the weekends, if it's being used.
What's residential?
Yeah, close to residential, and I would imagine, and perhaps the public there can address this, how early would be open?
yeah. Well, again, I mean, I don't wanna make a big deal out of this, I just wanted to. To me, if they're moving a piece of equipment, that's not a big deal, but if they're operating that equipment for. Constant use during the day, that might be a different issue, so I just,
Yeah, I guess I
think-
as I think about it, it's in one respect, it's kind of minor, and it might not necessarily have to come to the planning board, it would have to come to the staff. And usually when there's a question from the staff calls the chair of the planning board,
right,
does the planning board want to look at this?
right, yeah,
Yes or
Yep.
no? In other words, there has to be notification from the operator these are gonna be the hours the staff takes a look at it. If they think there's an issue, it comes to the planning board.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Okay,
it's, I think would be, except for how early.
right.
I think would be a relatively minor issue.
And Alan, I would just offer that most of these uses are not doing work on that site, they're going off-site. to
I
do work.
understand.
So it's more of a loading and.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just,
One thing I'd say is, when we place the same restrictions on an agricultural, a farm. Are we worried about machinery moving around a farm? Because part of the reason why we're expanding this is predicated on the idea that this isn't that different a use from already approved uses in the RF district. So I guess I struggle to think that we would put a restriction on equipment or machinery moving around a farm on a weekend. Maybe we would, but I struggle to think that we would.
well, I don't think we do otherwise. So,
And if that's the case, I would
yeah,
kind of extend that to the premise of why we think this is a good new
Yeah.
approved use. So,
well, yes, I understand. I guess I'm finishing up. If the planning board has got some purview over this, then I guess I'm good with what their recommendation might be. Robin?
Yeah, you can't regulate hours of agriculture, in that you're gonna have cows mooing all through the
Yeah.
night. Everything's gonna stink 24/7. And we're mixing, and when you're mixing uses, commercial ag with landscape contractor, you're talking about very different operations
Right.
here. And, so I don't know what staff, I guess I wanna know what staff is looking to regulate here, because you can't really regulate employee housing, it's 24/7. You can't regulate animal husbandry, it's 24/7. If a pig gets out, you have to use a tractor to go get it, okay, and you're using equipment. And the landscape contractor, I don't know, I feel like it's square peg round hole.
So to Robin's point, I agree. That's why I pulled it out as its own separate. I didn't think landscape contractor was the same as agricultural product or agricultural operation. That's why I created a whole separate no use and it'll have to be added to the zoning district because I didn't think it meant the same thing. So these standards wouldn't apply backwards to agricultural. This is just specific to the landscape contractor business, which has a specific definition.
Yep.
And that definition, it's the business of designing, installing, planting, maintaining lawns, gardens, etc. Landscape contractor also means providing snow removal services with vehicles, equipment, and supplies that are stored, parked, buildings and structures such as barns, storage buildings, facilities, temporary shelters. All of the structures have to go through the site plan process. So I just created a new use outside because we don't specifically have a landscape contractor use.
Yeah.
And my concern that I raised last time about the difference between landscape contractor and property management. I mean, we have to, to me, it's a volume issue and it's a little bit of a different, uses and priorities kind of a thing. I just, when you talk about snow removal, you're gonna have plow trucks coming in at all hours of the night, sand trucks coming in at all hours of the night. So again, I'm trying to understand what we're trying to regulate, and putting the two together seems, what are we trying to do? I guess.
I'm trying to create an opportunity for a business to be a landscape contractor, be able to go through the site plan approval process with the planning board, subject to the performance standards in BB, which includes the planning board may regulate hours of operation because they may be all hours of the night if they're having a snow operation removal. And then they can have the benefits for agricultural employee housing in RF. That's what I'm been asked to do by the applicant, and that's what we've been talking about.
Yeah, all right.
And the point was that we want commercial agriculture to be able to have multi-businesses to support the family farm or something like that. Is that correct?
No,
No,
this
this
was
is separate.
just that is the RF district appropriate for this type of use? They exist now,
Landscape contract.
right?
I think in general, as a long range planning committee, though, we have agreed with that premise though. Rachel, the idea that,
If you're an existing farm.
if you're an existing farm, if you're a commercial agricultural operation, we shouldn't put strictures on modest extensions of your business model. We shouldn't let you put a chemical refinery on your property, but modest extensions of your business model, such as, for example, landscaping, to allow the family farm to continue to thrive. So that premise, I think, is true for the RF district, but I think it is a little bit different than what you're trying to do for this specific.
This is a specific use, and then it would also need to be, this specific use would also have to be added to BORI and LI, because we allow contractors, offices and shops. That's how we sort of
Well,
lump
that's
them.
where it belongs.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it's just, is it okay in RF? That's really the conversation. Is it close enough to agricultural? And that was
I
where it
would
came.
say if it's one truck.
I just want to point out, we do allow this residential piece in other business categories, like we actually added this type of, it's a little bit different because it's talking about one little apartment at Willowdale, so the ordinance did allow that, and I think
The golf club?
yes, they can have a
So it's
residence
existing
there
golf
or an
club.
on-site manager, but it was tied to the
It's not their
employee.
primary business.
Yeah, and there was, there's another one, I think moving and storage. Because they want somebody there overnight,
Yeah,
they can have somebody on site. It's a little bit different,
Mhm.
you know, but it's still
This
an
is-
example.
More so seasonal workers can come
Right.
in and stay,
Yeah.
because as we all know, it's really expensive to live here, quite honestly, and so they're having and I've seen this come through, just sidebar. I've had a request, a conversation with some medical facilities asking, can we create some housing because our employees can't be close enough?
No, I'm good. Yes.
My sister is a landscape contractor in Booth Bay. And I guess to Robin's point, she runs a small operation. She has a couple of small trucks. She brings plants in and so on, alternative plant, yeah, the sun. But to the point of, you know, how many vehicles are we talking about here? Are we talking about, you know, a whole fleet of vehicles for snow removal, or are we talking about somebody who puts a plow on the front of his truck and does driveways and that kind of thing in the winter? I mean, there's a difference between the two. If you've got sand trucks and all that, kind, you know, big time operation, that is a full scale operation, and that's different than I think what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
This is a smaller,
Yeah, no, I'm just,
yeah, no, I think to clarify, makes it easier for everybody to understand what it is.
Could always, so right now I have it as performance standard number 3, about the number of motor vehicles and trailers. That it has to be approved by planning board, but you could always put a limit on it, you know, that no more than a maximum of this, and then the planning board further conversations, but. That would be in the definition. So you could enhance the definition to limit the number of
Yeah.
vehicles.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because the plow is different than a huge,
I mean, we talk about all the ways that we want to maintain the rural character on the west side of the highway. Why is there LI there? I mean, I know I'm mixing messages here, but people move into RF with a certain expectation, right? And if you're having, if farms are part of that rural nature. Even though, apologize.
So it sounds like for the landscape contractor definition. And maybe how, okay, so. The landscape contractor definition, I actually don't want to change because it's very generic and it's a use that applies throughout the town, right? So in the, where it says it's allowed in RF and it goes to specific performance standards, I'm gonna back up, change my mind. On number 3, I would like to add a limit there for the number of vehicles, and that would specifically apply to RF. zoned property.
You think that's reasonable?
Yeah, I think it's totally reasonable.
Okay.
For a landscape contractor, yeah.
So
you're
what
trying to
is
do
the number, what's that magic number that you all are thinking is? I don't have enough,
I'd say no more than two, but,
like 2 trucks. Yeah, and I don't think that would,
be reasonable.
yeah,
I think it's gonna depend on how much land you have too.
right? That's kind of why I was thinking it's really a planning board conversation, because it's like if you have to have a minimum of 4 acres to do this in RF. So that's what we put in place.
Okay.
And then you have to meet these side yard setbacks. And then you have to show, that you're not having adverse impacts on abutting uses and neighbors through the site plan process. You have to be able to show adequate parking. So I'm not sure if there is a magic number because every instance might be a little bit different.
Um,
I agree, because if, as part of this, the applicant, the developer wants to put permanent housing on there, then we have to start to look at the number of parking spaces for cars for the permanent housing. Even if they're going to put removable housing on there, we still have to take a look at the amount of space taken up by all of the buildings and what's left. And then make a determination as to how many trucks, because if somebody takes their truck home, that's one thing. If somebody drives in there to pick up a truck, all of a sudden we have more traffic going back and forth. So we've had a situation in town where there was a question about how parking was arranged, and jiggered around, and finally, I think maybe we've got a solution there. Depends on the number of complaints that have come through recently. Anyhow, I think it will cause some agitation on the planning board to work it through, but I think it's possible. I think, given enough guidance here, the planning board has on this overarching responsibility to take a look at the 4 acres and see how it's used. The minimum of 4 acres.
Peter?
Does some of this get taken care of if we make this a special exception as opposed to a permitted use?
Sure, you could do the same type of thing. That's actually the second part of my request that we've received in the interim from these gentlemen is they have a landscape contractor business that's been, I think, in operation for like 8 years. And it just came to the town's notification because of a burning issue. And so we have a notice of violation to them, and we're trying to work with them through my office to come up with a solution or have them move by April. And so their request is that we have this conversation, let's see where this could go. They're in the Running Hill district. And the Running Hill district is a whole nother can of beans, because it's this very great expansive district, but only if you have sewer. So there's really no other things to do. So their use seems appropriate to me as a special exception with these same parameters. So that was the second part of this conversation. You could definitely put that back on the RF district as well, Peter, and
It strikes me that covers some of the issues that Robin, you're bringing up, and the planning board, working is bringing up as well.
it'd be like a 2-pronged process. So the special exception process has a set of rules that you have to meet to make sure you're really not hurting your neighbors and the surroundings. And then you'd still go to planning board for site plan approval and further discuss it. And
I guess the point is it allows us, or it allows the council to at least make that first screen.
Mhm.
Get around some of the first screening issues that I hear coming up, as Robin kind of has raised her comments and other things. So just a thought on that one. It seems like this is a spot where a special exception rather than a permitted use is probably the way to go.
Well,
In addition to the number of vehicles, I would take exception to what materials are stored there and in what quantities. Specifically, Running Hill is in the Red Brook district, knowing that's a priority watershed area for the town. We can't necessarily have stockpiles of salt and sand being unprotected without some kind of cover or erosion controls, built into, I guess I would want both structural and non-structural controls. Meaning you're going to control it structurally, put a roof on it, some sides, but then also have standard operating practices where if there are spills, you have spill containment for people, hydraulic line. There are sweeping requirements if you're tracking in and out of your driveway. There are a number of things when it comes to material storage, pesticides, and in addition to the hours of operation, but definitely a butter notifications is really important. So that if the neighbors who do have an existing complaint with, whatever happens at 1 o'clock in the morning during a snowstorm and you're keeping a lot of people safe, there is a consequence to pay in your neighborhood, and it's just making sure that your neighborhood has a voice.
This keeps snowballing, but I guess, and I'm asking this question to the board. Does anybody have concerns about size of the business in any given area? And if so, would it make sense that in an effort to try to aid the planning board, who basically is being asked to make some of these qualitative decisions, to, I'll use the word, put together a table that basically says if your business grows to be X size.
You talking about like numbers of employees?
Yeah, like numbers of
Like
employees.
1 to 4 and then from
Yeah.
5 to.
That we put together something that says you need X amount of space, property space, to be able to get the business to go beyond certain limits or restrictions on vehicle and stuff like that, to try to help minimize the potential impact overall on a piece of property. Robin?
Are the landscape contractors trying to get housing too, full-time housing?
Not this,
Not,
no, the original request is a landscape contractor that exists in the RF through a special exception and a non-conforming approval. And he would like to add employee housing, seasonal employee housing. He, as a non-conforming use, he doesn't have full rights as an agricultural, so he's requesting landscape contractor be a conforming use, and then you can finish employee housing.
I think that's really far-fetched. I think that a seasonal landscape contractor housing someone at your house, go through the process to get a.
What process? There is no process
To
that
get an
exists.
accessory dwelling.
He cannot do an he
Non-conforming.
cannot do it. There is no process. That's what the request is about. There is no means for him to request accessory housing on a non-conforming use. So he is asking for his use to be reclassified as a conforming use. That is me creating a landscape contractor use specifically outside of agricultural, and asking you all if you're in agreement with that being an appropriate use. If you're not, just say no and we can be done.
Yeah. So say no to what?
The whole idea. Just say no to the landscape contractor being allowed in RF.
That's good.
And then we'll talk about, is landscape contractor a special exception in Running Hill?
I'm bold enough to say no. Landscape contractors do not belong in our house.
So I guess we've met a few times, and no disrespect, Robin, you weren't here, I think the first
Yep.
time we met, and we talked
Yep.
about it, and we had the applicant here. And we were sort of moving it along in a positive route. And I just want everybody else to, I need to know that from everyone.
Yep.
So I can move forward or not.
I agree with Rob. Well, I'm not voting, sorry.
You can still call it.
That's fine, sorry. I agree with Robin.
Do you want us to?
Yep.
Take a vote.
Yes, please.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, before we take vote, my understanding is we're being asked to make a recommendation the planning board on the proposed,
To ordinance committee.
the ordinance committee on the proposed addition of landscapes and contractor and the related performance standards. I don't think we're being asked to say we do or do not think it's a good idea. I guess it's not a problem for us to extend that recommendation, but I guess I'd rather have the ordinance committee think about some of the issues that have been raised in this discussion. And we report those issues to the ordinance committee. The ordinance committee can then tinker with the language as necessary. I guess I'm not comfortable just saying no.
Well, I don't think we have the ability to block it out totally, do we? I think that's,
It comes to
It-
you all first, and then you make
Right.
a recommendation to ordinance.
right, so it's a recommendation that we're gonna present to the ordinance committee as opposed to we don't,
But if you don't recommend,
If we
so
don't-
I bring it to you
That's my
staff,
point.
and if you all say, no, we don't think this should go to ordinance committee, then it's done. It doesn't move to ordinance, I don't take it to ordinance committee, then you all, it just dies here, you are that first.
Autumn doesn't have the independent authority to bring it to.
Right, right, that's what this committee, your purview is, you review zoning requests, and zoning changes and amendments and whatnot, so. If you make a proposal to the ordinance committee that, you know, to review this and further, you know, that's the only way I get it to ordinance committee, is if you all tell me to get it.
And importantly, that's why we have our council representatives who get to hear this conversation. And understand the concerns that we might have if we don't do that, but we can, to Autumn's point, simply not recommend anything and then it stops here.
Absolutely, and I guess the point I was trying to make about the west side of the highway is if we don't want to erode that rural character, then this doesn't have any place there.
And
You
see-
all didn't move it forward a year ago either, so
And also say
it's come
from,
before us twice.
I mean,
on,
it's the reason that we say we don't want sewer and water out there. We don't want to erode the rural character, so you can't have your cake and eat it too.
if I might on that comment though, we've had quarries on that side of the turnpike for decades. So it's not like we are, the RF district exists simply to preserve commercial farming, commercial agriculture. And if you look over
On
there,
my neighborhood, on my family farm, we had 2 gravel pits. Thank you.
look,
Yeah,
I'm,
it's
listen,
part of farming.
no, I'm not talking about a gravel pit that's part of a farm. I'm talking about honest to God gravel pits.
That's what's happened over time.
That's the entire purpose of a number of properties over there. And they're now being filled in with big mansions. Because the gravel pits are no longer economical.
Yep.
Um,
For the last 30 years.
but, so we're gonna allow the erosion of the RF district with McMansions. But we're not gonna allow a commercial use. And I think that's a ridiculous withholding of property rights for people who buy property. And so I would recommend that we move forward with a recommendation for a special exception process for this. And we vote on it.
Yeah.
There we go.
So if we do a special exception, we can then say landscape, other than this special exception, no other landscape contractors can really be there unless you're part of an existing family farm.
No, if we approve an special exception, it goes through the special exception process, which is, I believe it goes to the zoning board, zoning board with a planning board recommendation, with one way or the other from the.
We would certainly hold a hearing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then we get, I'm thinking about just from the zoning board process, we usually get a letter from you recommending approval, or recommending a special exception.
Yeah, and any conditions that we think you should impose.
So it would go to planning board for an advisory opinion, then it goes to the Board of Appeals, and then it would go back to planning board for a site plan, if it made it.
That's right, and the zoning board at that point can not approve the special exception use or approve it with conditions. Then, and we kind of have almost unlimited rights to attach conditions. So,
And I think we're saying the same thing, Peter.
Mhm.
Like, I don't want this 8-year-old business to go out of business. But are we really doing ourselves any favor by considering adding it to this RF?
well, and
They're in
That's-
our,
That's
they're
what
in
I'm-
Running Hill District.
yeah, exactly, and I do want to separate the Running Hill from the
Yeah, we have
RF
two
district,
different-
so.
So the first one is.
So I'm mixing messages.
Yeah, the first act, I would ask you all to make a motion to, do we want to add landscape contractor as a permitted use or with a special exception in the RF district with the associated performance standards.
Does this allow other landscape contractors to?
Yes, they would be a use on the use table that other landscape contractors could request a special exception if they meet the performance standard requirements in the RF district.
Did I hear a proposal?
I tried to, but it was challenging. So, but I would like to, and I'll move, and if I get the language wrong, please help me out on this one. I would like to move that for the RF district, we approve the landscape contractor, language as drafted by staff as a special exception, not as a permitted use, but as a special exception use, subject to the regular approval processes that exist for special exceptions.
Is there a second? All right, so we have a motion and we have a second. Any discussion?
Yeah. So does it mean then that anyone can start a landscape business as long as they meet the special exception
They
requirement?
have to go through all. the
Yes.
steps.
All the special exception, which includes performance standards,
Planning board.
planning board,
Yeah.
okay.
And the zoning board, and the zoning board will attach,
So oversight.
and the zoning board can remember attach additional contingencies or requirements as part of the special exception approval.
Will the performance standards include the additional things that we talked about? The number of vehicles, the material storage, the abutter notification and the hours of operation?
Some of that's on site plan.
So the performance standards already include the hours of operation and then the trailers. What I did add was that there would be no open storage of materials.
Okay.
That would be a new one, but I did not put in a specific number of vehicles or specific hours. That would be part of the special exception and the site plan.
And Robin, one of the reasons I thought special exception would be good is that the zoning board acts as a body to put those on at specific.
Yeah,
sites.
and I don't know enough about that, so
Yeah,
I
yeah, sure.
certainly appreciate you bringing
Yeah,
that
yeah.
to our attention.
Yeah,
Thank
that's,
you.
yeah.
All three processes require a butter notification. So what happens a lot of times if 10 neighbors show up and say, whoa, this is terrible, we don't want this, then it's really, it comes into their decision making.
Does it go beyond the butters or only?
Just 500 feet.
Yeah, Judy.
My concern about this is that it will dilute the intent of the RF district and leave the door open. I understand what you're saying about all the steps. But I still think that the intent, that doing this will dilute the intent of the RF district. And I'm sort of in agreement with Robin.
No, and to Judy's point, I understand where she's coming from. And I find myself a little bit stuck in the past in that, when I moved here, there were still a lot more active farms. And to Peter's point that, we're not preserving the rural character by building McMansions, absolutely true. Is absolutely true. But I want to do whatever I can to preserve the rural character and get water and sewer over there, so I'll leave it.
Yeah, and the ironic,
Those two.
I know.
the ironic thing on that thing is that I think if you allowed a landscape facility like this one, within that 500-foot buffer, you're gonna have a less attractive zone for mansions. And so you might actually end up having the inadvertent effect of preserving woodlands around the property.
But we're gonna get a lot of, if there's a lot of, salt stored there.
Yeah, no,
We're gonna
we-
get groundwater intrusion.
we've got
into those wells
it,
around there.
and I think that's where
Yeah,
a special exception becomes importantly because each site is going to be different.
Yeah.
And we gotta, we need the public to engage with the zoning board process so that we have that information as well. And staff to engage with us as well, but you guys do a great job on that, so.
So the real difference, as I can read, between commercial agriculture and landscape contractors, the ability to do snow removal. I mean, you've got all barns and all the same kind of things. You could have a farmer who says, well, now I can do snow removal and use my equipment. I mean, I agree with the special
Okay.
exception piece because there's just too much overlap here between the categories to
And speaking as chair of the zoning board, we love the public input from abutters. That helps us understand the process. It helps us design the contingencies for individual sites that otherwise you can't codify in an ordinance.
Any new discussion?
Yes, once they become conforming, can they then go through a normal process to get an accessory dwelling? Yeah. So can we take the whole farm temporary dwelling thing out of this?
Well,
Because there's a process for that.
they can't do an accessory dwelling. I don't know, if you all are. The way that I have it is just a really easy way to let employee housing be added for temporary. You can't do an ADU for a commercial business, you have to have a single family home, so this is what you can do for that.
I don't understand why a landscape contractor needs to have a dwelling. I really, an additional dwelling. Karen, can you speak to that?
Sure, I mean, certainly, again, we have examples of this in the ordinance where there are certainly.
Their uses, sorry Karen, but their uses
Yes,
allow it.
exactly.
So they're definitely.
Restaurants,
No.
agriculture, no?
No, but there are cases where, you know, certainly the farming contractors, things like that, that may have number one, difficulty finding employment and our employees and not being able to find housing for employees, particularly of a seasonal nature. And, you know, certainly where you've got activity that occurs, you know, in longer hours, like a contractor, you certainly are going to want to have access to that. It's just hard to find any type of seasonal housing.
Then we were gonna get serious about affordable housing around here.
But it's seasonal, which
Yeah.
the focus for affordable
I
housing.
have a hard time.
Yeah, if I could just, as council liaison, and I don't want to overstep, but you know, one of my priorities is housing and affordable housing, and accessory dwelling units are definitely a key ingredient in that, and I think I don't want to, again, put my thumb on the scale in terms of this particular item, but just as a general comment, given the way things are structured in Scarborough with our zoning and growth management ordinance, and just passed a land bond that's gonna, which I supported, which is gonna take some land off the table. I think there are gonna be a lot of the opportunities for affordable housing are gonna be these sort of like marginal accessory type things. And so just as a general comment, I would personally, and I think as, you know, being on the council, this will be a position that I'm going to take. I would generally err more on the side of being a little more lenient with ADUs, within reason, obviously. But I just think we talk about affordable housing, and there's only so much that can really be done at the local policymaking level to support it and facilitate it. And I think, you know, there are a lot of well-intentioned things that are going on around town, but one of the byproducts is that we're sort of taking more and more off the table. And so if the town wants to continue to be economically healthy, and, you know, if we really want to, you know, walk the walk on housing, I think we need to just keep that in mind. So. Thanks.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I can think of 2 times in my history in the planning board that we've wrestled with employee housing. And in one case, it was actually both cases, it was a restaurant. And for one of them, we essentially approved the plans because it was a conversion of a second floor of a building that was there, and ensured that there was adequate housing. In other words, that the housing for the employees met all of the requirements, that it wasn't just here, throw 10 people in a room. And the second case, it was a restaurant, and we said no, because it was throw 10 people in a room without access to a full bathroom. So it's something that we've wrestled with, not always with good guidance in the ordinance. So, I would think we would appreciate, I think we, as the planning board, can handle a request with appropriate guidance, and a lot of that guidance really comes from the special exception rules. And also from what we do in terms of the whole process of the site plan approval process.
Right, thank you. I think we've heard from all our members. So with that in mind, I will ask, based on the question before us, all in favor?
Oh,
Can you repeat the motion?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
you're right.
Yeah, so it would be to include the language that, or to approve as a special exception,
Recommend, yeah.
or recommend it to the ordinance committee. Let me start here. We will recommend to the ordinance committee that the landscape contractor approved use be added to the RF ordinance as a special exception with the language as proposed by staff.
And take into account all our comments today.
I think that goes without saying. And in all honesty, Rick, I think that's, again, I get back to, that's why we have our town council reps on, so I would just include it as motions.
Great.
All right, all in favor?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we're not done. Now we need to talk about Running
The right
Hill.
heels, yeah.
So the Running Hill district, are you comfortable with the same type of use in the Running Hill district as a special exception? That would be the second part of it.
I am.
What's the difference? Can you just give us a quick, rough idea of the difference between the zoning and RF and right now?
Well, did I quote from the ordinance? And I think the big difference is this. So the purpose of the Running Hill Gorham Road Mixed Use District, RH, is to provide for and encourage the Running Hill Road and Gorham Roads area west of the main turnpike to develop as a high-quality, well-planned and mixed-use center. This district is intended to accommodate a mix of office, service, financial, research, small retail, recreational, and residential uses in an environment conducive to both pedestrians and motorists. Development is intended to be compact and interconnected with common spaces, enabling walkability, human activity, and vibrancy, as well as a convenient and orderly vehicular access and circulation. Master planning for large parcels will enable flexibility, creativity, open spaces, and an overall character for the development. The district shall be considered a business district whenever this ordinance distinguishes between types of districts.
No brainer.
But then I wanna say that you read all that great stuff, and then it says, all new development or redevelopment shall be served by public sewer. So therein lies the conundrum with that district, is that we have all these great plans and it's great zoning. I get calls about it all the time. There's no public sewer. We were just kidding. So that's why.
Town is not conforming.
Right, so that's why I think that, you know, maybe there is this interim time where these other uses are appropriate.
Certainly, I'll certainly comment about the number of people that have come and gone. Because the price of the sewer, to put sewer and water under the turnpike is, yes, astronomical. And it just keeps increasing every year. I think we started out maybe 10 years ago, it was 4 million just to serve one site. Now I think it's, triple that. And no developer so far, including when Amazon was talking to us, no developer has been excited about or been willing to take on the full cost of that.
Why is it the developer's responsibility? Why isn't it a discussion between Dave Hughes and Tom Hall?
The sewer district's policy is they don't extend anything unless somebody pays for it. So
the town paid for Haggis.
And I don't think you find them doing that again anytime soon. And the reason is when they did Haggis, so Haggis Parkway, the utility extensions that were done there versus, I'll just explain, Haggis Parkway versus the dams. So in Haggis Parkway, the town did take on all of the expenses of putting in water, sewer, and the gas lines, as well as some other things. Then the economy dropped off.
Yep.
And all of those landowners wound up getting assessed another fee. And Rick, you can, clear that up by explaining it badly. So it became very expensive, and the town was upside down for a while on the TIF that was created. In other words, we owed more on the sewer and water than we were taking in for the revenues. It's since been corrected, and we've fixed that over a very long period of time. For the downs, we did it the opposite. We said, hey, you want to do it, you do it, and we'll pay you back for a small portion of it. So all the financial burden has been on the developer. And in all of my discussions with the town, particularly on Running Hill Road, it's been, we'll consider participating, but we, as the town, are not financing any extensions, utility extensions to Running Hill Road.
And so that's a policy, a current policy, or just unwritten?
I don't think it's a policy per se. It's just been, that's been the, yeah, it's a council decision. And they look at both examples, and there's very little risk with the downs because they're fronting all of that. There was a major risk with Higas Parkway.
I disagree.
Okay.
Financial risk, but environmental risk.
I want to bring us back to, I gotta bring us back.
I'm bringing
because
it
we
back.
have
Can I
still-
finish?
Yeah,
Thank
but
you. So if the town has done it for Higas and Downs,
No, they did not do it for the downs.
sorry, thank you. If there's been a tip involved in Higas and the Downs, it can be done for Running Hill. And in fact, hear me out. It can actually, we can concentrate development there, so we don't end up with FedEx out on Holmes Road. So if we are strategic about where we want to go next, that's a discussion that's in the minutes from our last meeting where Dave Hughes and Tom Hall and a workshop needs to be had to discuss this so that we can concentrate development. Otherwise, we're gonna have wells continue to run dry, have saltwater intrusion and the like. And is that the town we want to live in?
Can I just quickly add, the finance committee met yesterday and we have a goal next year to reassess TIFs that we may propose to the council, and we can include the RH component just to make sure that we advance this conversation so that you guys can focus on the issue at hand. But we do have this as an area we want to explore further.
Can someone let that lady in?
No, it's an exit only door, the alarm. Will go off, we'll get in trouble.
it's for the police department.
Do you understand how I brought it back to the conversation here?
I totally understand. I'm trying to keep us focused on
I
it.
know, and I think it's a no-brainer. I'm willing to propose a motion to extend the landscaping into the Running Hill district with the same sort of implications. Yeah, a special exception.
I'll be honest, I'm less comfortable because I'm thinking now as a zoning board member, I don't know what the hell this district is. I mean, this literally, if I'm going to hear to understand, oh, it's landscape contractors allowed here, why? Because it's a mixed use, and what the hell is this? And so I think if we want to do this and offer this ability on what is clearly a poorly legislated piece of our town, I think we need more guidance as a zoning board to understand, is one of the limits on here is you have to be able to roll it up and get off the land in 5 years. Because we may make this an area where we're gonna put a mixed, the next downs. I don't know how to approve the special exception of this.
Well, Running Hill has a mixture of a lot of single family homes now that are not allowed either. So.
But again, we're not extending their use. You're asking me to extend the use here. And so how do I do that?
What would come before you for a Board of Appeals for this specific user would be, hey, we've been in business for 8 years. We haven't had any issues. This is how we address your standards. all of our neighbors would be noticed and we would hear from them. And you all, it's the same conversation you have, you know, on a monthly basis about other strange sort of requests.
It's interesting that one of the special exception checklist items was the property in use before 1991. And it talks about the fact that the grandfathering occurred 30 years ago. This would not be the case on this
Right.
property. So we get it and say, great, interesting, we can't approve this 1 year out. That's how it works.
Well, right now, they're in violation of our ordinance and they have until April to find another location for their business. So
Yeah, I'm just not sure what we could do with this, if we made this special, we have to make it a P, the approved use, right? Where it doesn't get special exception approval
In running. No.
in Running Hill. And so, which I wouldn't be comfortable with.
Rick,
Does
that's
it
for
make
Mr.
sense to recommend this use in the Running Hill district when we know it can't happen without sewer? Should we postpone this?
Well,
Pending further discussion on sewer,
the current use, what's being asked for, the current use doesn't require sewer.
well, wait, I'm confused here. We've already.
Right.
recommended Special
I get it,
exception, for
yeah.
the other district. Where sewer isn't a requirement, correct? Now we're talking about special exception for this use in the Running Hill district, where at least as to a new business.
That's correct.
Sewer would be required, and we know there's no sewer up there. And it's hard to imagine that a relatively small landscaping business is gonna plug down $12 million to extend a pipe under the highway.
Well,
So I guess I'm trying to figure out why we would recommend this at all in that district, unless under the special exception process, they could be exempt from sewer. I haven't looked at it. So I'm concerned about recommending something we know can't happen then in that district.
Can they be considered an existing non-conforming business?
I'm sorry.
Can they be considered an existing non-conforming business
Well, I'm,
to get around it
the
somehow?
ordinance says new development needs sewer, right?
Yeah, and this isn't new development.
Again, I'm confused. Which business, where is the business that apparently is Mr. Beaver's business is on Broad Turn?
It's on broad term. This is an RF.
That's is there a business existing now in Running Hill for this?
Yes.
Your business?
These
All
two
right,
gentlemen have the business.
Which already exists.
It's the one that I included the notice of violation in the packet.
Well, I still think that the issue, the
It's
concern I
existing
have is
non-conforming.
permitting this use in the Running Hill district as a new business doesn't make sense to me if we know it can't happen without sewer. I'm a little confused now about Mr. Beaver's business, which already says, well, Robin maybe hit the right issue, which is it a existing non?
He was an existing.
I don't know enough about
He
it.
has a special exception. This one in Running Hill, you can just, I could work with them, the other option they would have if you don't move this forward is they could request a contract zone. That's kind of like what I'm left with, other than you move out, you can go to RF and do a special exception. Or you do a contract zone where you just relocate your business. Or the special exception is allowed in Running Hill with, and to your point, maybe. That was kind of my question is there any interim sort of uses that are appropriate without sewer, right, for Running Hill, because everything requires it?
And Mr. Chairman, I actually, because this exists because of prior, and if you'll excuse me, Corey, don't take this the wrong way, prior council action to create the Running Hill district without thinking adequately about downstream consequences. A contract zone is probably the way to highlight the issue and probably the best way to move forward for this.
So you don't think it should be grandfathered or could be
No, I don't think it could be grandfathered,
I see.
That's not what we're being
It's
asked.
not
No,
allowed.
I understand.
but yeah, it couldn't. If we made it a special exception, I would immediately to the zoning board come to the first question, which is, was the property used for existing purpose on or before, I think it's January 1 of 1991? The answer to that would be no, and therefore I don't go any further. I can't approve the special exception.
I lost the thread of the discussion.
Yeah.
So like I said, I would I think the right path forward would be to recommend to the applicant. I know that I don't like referring to you as a third person, but recommend to the applicant and recommend to the council the consideration of the contract zone for the property to
Address Mr. Beaver.
Not Mr. Favors, Mr. Jones.
Two different.
Two different.
This is why I say the applicant. I'll get.
Yeah, there you
go. And not try to solve it by changing
Okay,
the Running Hill ordinance, which is, I have a thought of how I would describe it, but it's not for family consumption,
understood.
so.
I'm just apparently Project Grace has this road reserved all day, so they're just asking if
Of
you are gonna
course they
finish it
do.
on the. Yeah,
And again, we will never be in here.
yes, yes. So we do want to wrap up right at 9:30 so they can get access to the room.
That's, okay, thanks, no problem. All right, so we won't move anything forward on that one. You all, I'll reach out to you next week, Brian, and we can talk about another option. But it did not move forward with this one.
And we're dropping it because
Because you all said.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily agree. I think
and
that-
Robin, I think we're dropping it and telling the council, you gotta deal with this. This is now your problem.
Okay, if that's the point.
Because the council has to approve the contract, so we can't do anything about a contract.
Council made the ordinance and council can deal with it.
Council did a fine job in drafting this particular ordinance, and they can deal with it down here.
Maybe it'll get the discussions going.
That's exactly.
Thank you.
Chairman, before we move on.
Yes.
Question or comment to Corey. This whole issue of sewer
Mhm.
going to the west side of the highway has been around for years, you know. And I think not the last comp plan, although maybe here too, but the one before that recommended that sewer be extended to the west side of the town. And I think that carried over into the more recent comp plan. But it hasn't happened. And there's a lot of sentiment now not to do that because it will allow for more residential development.
Right.
West of the highway, and nobody wants to see. It would be helpful if the council could take this issue up and just kind of clarify where the council is.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate, and I know I think John is still listening, and he can speak for himself, but I tend to agree with that. I think it's something that, as it stands now, it's sort of a de facto cap on activity there, and I think at times in my opinion, it's somewhat weaponized. And so I think we need to be a little more sort of transparent and intentional about it.
What are the circumstances
Speaking as one
under which
counselor,
the
yeah,
council-
whatever the position is. Because there
Yeah.
is sort of this unstated or partly stated, it's not really, as to your question earlier, it's not officially a policy. But it's sort of it's sort of inertia.
Corey, the other issue I think is we've raised before too, is that we use the RF district as that sort of buffer, as you call it. But there are multiple flavors of RF throughout the town. And even on the west side of the turnpike, there are different flavors of RF on the west side. So I think we've reached the end of the viability of using the undifferentiated RF district as a tool. And we need help and advice from council in terms of where to move forward with the RF district.
Can I chime in real quick?
Yes, John.
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes back to Autumn's. Maybe it wasn't a fully serious suggestion, but I think it's resonated with me that there needs to be a more deeper, comprehensive plan light for the west side of 95. And I think through that, we would address the RF comment that was just made, the public water sewer, and really just be clear that as we do that, I would have no problem personally with public water and sewer on the other side. I think it's important. I think the residents that live there today would appreciate it. We just need to make sure we have the other zoning things in place that manage the consequences and need to really kind of understand all those things. So I think it's complicated, but I think it's doable. It just needs to get prioritized.
And also deal with the inevitable consequences for the RF on this side of the turnpike, because there's a bunch of RF on our side as well, right this side.
And the council will be doing its goal setting soon, and I think we can certainly include this as part of that conversation.
And I will add that, staff is meeting with the council prior to the goal setting to go over some of these, and I have a long, long list of items. I just add to it every day.
All right, so what I'd like to do, we've got about 15 minutes or so left. Several of the things that we need to address. I apologize that we're not going to get to your item this morning. We also need to be out of this room in about 15 minutes, so given that, I'd like to move on with the agenda so that we can give the public an opportunity to make comments if they have any, and I'll start here.
Well, thank you for our consideration. Just to sum up what we're looking for, we're an existing company in our Running Hill site for about 8 years now. It's a non-retail contractor pull-down yard. There is mulch and salt on site. Very willing to conform with proper storage. We think we're doing a pretty good job of that as is. But not looking for any housing, not looking for anything but basic laydown, continued usage in our existing commercial site. It was brought to our attention that there was just a few things that were a little out of line, and so we're here seeking the board just to kind of get our usage understood and classified properly so we can continue operating as Scarborough.
All right, thank you.
I'm here as Danny is for the light industrial and RFO. And the neighbors did meet with counselors Anderson and Cushing last night. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend. We have a family emergency going on right now, which I have to head back to the hospital. But I understand there's a lot of discussion. I don't know if Autumn or John, if John shared with Autumn, Autumn shared with all of you, my notes for the light industrial, but I put all mine in blue of, you know, what I see that area. So I hope that you can at least look at that before the next time this is discussed, and we appreciate the town looking at this as well as, you know, what the west side of the turnpike should be.
All right, thank you.
Denise, will you send that to me directly? I don't think I have anything with blue highlights.
Okay, yeah, I had told John, share it with you
Okay.
to everybody.
I don't think I have that.
Okay,
Thank
no
you.
problem. I can send it later.
Okay, so this will be brought up at the next meeting. It's gonna be a month away. With the light industrial
Yes.
agenda. So, I guess I just want to point in one thing. Thankfully, there was discussion about Running Hill Road, in that district. The 2006 comprehensive plan was developed and incepted and encouraged the light industrial district. It encouraged water and sewer extension to the district. At some point, the Running Hill zone was also created, and there are two districts that don't have sewer and water. There may be a potential possibility of connecting the two districts as far as sewer and water go, where Running Hill would flow south to the light industrial district and then go into the highway with one crossing. That is something that's just started in discussion with the landowner of Running Hill Road, Mr. Grondin, and myself. It's very preliminary. There are users that are interested in my parcel that are willing to foot the majority of the bill of the extension of the utilities. Karen can attest that Amazon has spoken of doing that. For Running Hill, I really just want to point out that the comprehensive plan took enormous amount of energy to create, and it considers the light industrial district a growth ordinance, growth area of the town of Scarborough. It's not just maybe it's RF or it's abutting RF. It is designed to protect RF. It's in the ordinance, and it's a growth area and encourages utilities extension for 20 years now. It also encourages it for the growth area of the Running Hill. So I think there may be a collaboration. There's a straight shot. It's only 5,000 feet away from each other, these two zones, at least the distance between Holmes Road and Gorham Road. There's a real chance that we can get these two areas served by sewer and water with one highway crossing. And there's concern about sprawl and further development in RF. I'm sure there's 100 ways we can mitigate that, prevent sprawl. So I find it hard to believe we're continuously discussing not bringing water and sewer to these two districts that were fully vetted, fully protected and fully envisioned. And then now I'm hearing that we don't want that anymore, and it doesn't make sense. There's too much energy involved, and not to mention too much investment. FedEx is invested deeply, I'm invested deeply. Mr. Gronen's invested deeply. We need to, I think we need to pump the brakes on not bringing sewer and water. The discussion should be, how can we help us to get that to happen? Because sewer and water is important for the neighbors of Two Rod Road. There's the landfill issue. There could be future problems with water quantity and quality because of the landfill itself. Water and sewer is important for this light industrial district as well, you know, for maybe environmental reasons for the LI district, but also it's important for the Running Hill district. And I see this areas, they're gonna get developed, and I think that I just find it hard to believe that there's counselors that have said it, spoke against the comp plan. I don't know how that's even possible. How can one comp plan that is so fantastic say that these are the things we want and these are the things we don't want in the town, and then they speak against it?
I would love to continue, but let's do it at the next meeting.
That's great. I appreciate the even saying that. I think there's been a lot of good conversation about the sewer and water, and I think it's perfect that I had that amount of time.
All right,
So,
thank
until
you.
next time.
John, are you still on with us?
Yep, I'm still here.
Any comments?
Yeah, well, I just want to share with the group that we did have a good meeting last night, Councilor Cushing, myself, with some of the landowners and residential property owners. Again, what I would kind of summarize as kind of the key takeaway from yesterday's conversation, and a lot of it was similar conversation that you guys had here today, I think, with the landscape contractor. I think in general, I would say that residents are generally good with the uses that are allowed in the LI district today and are comfortable keeping it LI. The concern is around performance standards and things like that. So there may be some things that should be special exceptions, or there may be some things that need tighter performance standards that don't exist today, like in trucking terminals. So again, I think that was my key takeaway from that conversation as you guys kind of advance. And again, I'm sure we'll continue to kind of hear from them as well in terms of specific things. But again, I think there's a path forward that, you know, delivers on the full intent of what the LI district was supposed to be, and can continue with really just some fine tuning, tightening up, dotting I's and crossing T's.
All right, thank you. Councilor Phelps.
Thanks. I just say it's good to be back in the loop here with Long Range Planning.
Welcome back.
Yeah, and as a new counselor, I'm still sort of getting my arms around some things. I'm fortunate to have some background in some of this stuff, and I will be serving on the ordinance committee, so and also liaison to the planning board. So hopefully there are some good synergies there, like where I can help support this group's work and work with the council to advance things as appropriate. So thank you.
All right. We'll go to staff.
So next week at planning board, we have 4 public hearings. We have the first, my favorite public hearing is about mobile food vendors. So that one's going, I'm excited. And then we have the wetland setbacks, the public hearings that have to do with those amendments. We had a lengthy, I think, 2-hour conversation at our last council meeting during that first reading of the ordinance, with many questions being asked. And with that, so I would encourage you all to tune in to see what happens with that.
Okay, Karen?
Mr. Chairman, actually, I have a question from staff.
Yep.
Do we have any turnover on this committee coming up for the new year?
No,
No. Okay.
we have 2 members that will term out, but it's next year.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Is that? When you say next week, 2020,
2025.
is it the fiscal year?
No, it's the end of the year, December 31st.
Yeah.
Karen?
No, I'm good. I think we're good for now.
All right. Can I give you 2 minutes to give us a little background?
Everyone, I'm the newest addition to the planning department, working with Autumn I moved to the area a few months ago from New York. I was working for New York City Emergency Management after getting my master's in city planning there in Brooklyn. So that's what I was doing most recently, but I'm excited to be here and get to work.
Might be slightly slower.
It may- I'm sorry, Helen.
Ellen or Helen?
Helen.
Right? Judith,
Nothing.
Rick,
Good, thank you.
Robin,
I got on two committees, one is open space and the other one is vulnerability assessment. And both of them have a draft plan like right now that looks amazing, and we look forward to sharing them both with you very soon.
Good.
Both open space and vulnerability assessment.
Are they online yet?
No, not yet. I think they're still just.
Yeah.
Open space will be up for public review like right over Christmas. So we're working through the final, vulnerability will be a little bit longer.
Staff and the consultants have done a great job. It's really good. Both accounts.
Rachel,
Yeah, as Autumn said, we're looking forward to 4 public hearings. I think we're gonna start seeing more coming through, just thinking about how the workflow goes. We have in front of us a subdivision plan for the town center at the Downs, that will essentially take a look at the market basket area, all of the commercial area. We also have, before us, the Aroma Joe's on Bridges Road, in the corner of Bridges Road and Hayne Road. That's something that started in 2019. COVID interrupted and then various things interrupted. I think they, from what the staff have indicated, it looks so they have all of their state permits, finally, so we'll see, what we've got left there. And we have an application for a subdivision. Those are coming through very rarely now because of, I think, the growth ordinance. And this is one on Scotto Hill Road, with access from Scotto Hill Road and Payne Road. It's a 10 lot subdivision. So that's starting up. I think it's an interesting piece of land. With a lot of slopes and wetlands, but that's what the planning board does. We have a sketch plan.
all right, thank you, Rachel. Portia,
I don't have much. I mean, Peter is the representative to the Transportation Committee and we're getting ready to do the plan is online and looking at that, so.
Exactly, we presented the transportation committee, presented the final assessment to council in a workshop.
Yeah.
And it went pretty well, I think. I think, so encourage people to take a look at that. It's a very comprehensive assessment of where our existing problems are for intersections and roadways around town. So we encourage people to do that. And now we kind of go to work at the next phase of where we go, exactly where we go next. The other thing is on the zoning board, been kind of slow on the zoning board, but we're losing at least one member and possibly a second member because of people becoming snowbirds, damn it. So if you know of people or have folks that are interested in being a zoning board member, it's one night a month. We try to, and it's, like I said, it's not been terrifically busy lately, although I say that now and we'll have a rough 2025, I'm sure. But if you have some candidates that would come through, please let them know to put their name on the Tony.
all right, thank you. I basically would like you, Autumn, to add an agenda item for next month. I think we should go through an election process for chair and vice chair again, so I haven't. I've been down out of play here for a couple of weeks, so I didn't get a chance to reach out to you to have you do that for this meeting, but I think we should do it for the next one. The other thing, from a personal perspective, I just want to thank all of those of you who have reached out and asked me how I was doing. I appreciate it, and
How are you doing?
I am getting better. I'm 3 weeks now since surgery, and things are progressing normally, I'll say. So with any luck, I've only got about 6 months more. So, we'll take it and go from there. I think, and I apologize, I did not see you there.
Oh, that's what
on it.
Yeah, that's fine. We're together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. So with that, 9:27, we could make it.
I move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second? We have a second. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? All right, thank you.
And here's I think Robin, you had asked for a schedule for next month. And I printed something for you guys, and you can cross off public safety building. I'll send you.
John forwarded me.
I saw,
Forwarded
thank
you.
you, yeah,
Oh,
thank.
lovely.
Yeah.
So is town hall going to open again or they just?
No,
gonna
we
give us the
don't
key?
do it the way I do it.
Yeah, okay.
I'll just let Evan-
And took it
Gotcha.
out.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think.
I'll forward it to you. I was.
It was last month's packet.
From last Exodus.
They work with you.
For our emergency management, the city agency.
Yes. Yeah. And,